So I recently came across Al Magma's series on his flight computer and I was really inspired and I was like, I want my own flight computer because I don't want to use his because then all the creations I build with it won't be completely mine. So this was my first attempt at building my very own universal flight computer that I just weld onto a creation and hook some things up and it can fly. And it was a complete fail. So let me actually show you my test creation that I built using this. So here it is. Now this thing is supposed to have gyro stabilization and altitude hold. And guess what? It's got one of them. The other one, not so much. I mean, it's an extremely goofy flyer. It's very unreliable. You don't know when it's going to fall. You don't know when it's going to rise. And it's a lot of balancing that's also involved. And like the whole point of a universal flight computer is that you don't need to do weight balancing. It just does it automatically. So that was a complete fail. So then I built version 2, which when you take it off the lift, the gyro kind of looks really neat with all the sensors angling up in that. I feel like this is honestly the best looking one because it's really sleek and the gyro also carries it. And this one uses a much different technique when it comes to the altitude hold. Now I will say this elevation sensor, the one in version 1, I built myself and as you saw it sucked. So instead of spending hours trying to manually make one myself, I got this off of the workshop, but I slightly modified it. But yeah, just say this portion is not my own design. However, the rest of it is. So with that said, this is the test flyer that I built using version 2 of my flight computer, and here it is. Same controls, except this one uses variable thrusters, aka thrusters on bearings, and depending on what angle you feed it, it will output a different thrust level. And as you can see, it is a much more stable hover. Now the problem with this is not in the altitude hold actually. The altitude hold doesn't change much from here. This was like the big advancement. But if I take this off the lift, you can see that its gyro stabilization is not the best. It leaves a lot to be desired. And that is what I improve in version 3. So this right here is version 3, and despite having a version 4, chances are I might still use this instead of version 4, probably because it's slightly smaller. However, it has completely overhauled the gyro. Now, as you can see, there's only 2 sensors as opposed to version 1 and 2, which used a lot more than 2 sensors. But they are slightly offset and they will be aligned using 2 bearings. If I take it off the left, you can see that they are at 30 degrees, and so now these 2 sensors are exactly in the middle of this block. Now this is a trick I learned from Al Magma. Basically, a sensor's activation point is in the center, and so because this block is currently triggering both of these sensors, that means the edge of this block is directly at the activation point of the sensor, and that means that even the slightest variation in tilt will cause these sensors to pick it up. So as you can see, just from lifting it up, the sensors changed and they moved and they detected that the tilt was off. Now this is a complete game changer for the accuracy of this gyro. It is way better than version 2, and so that was basically the main advancement with version 3. So this is a test flyer that I built using version 3. Again, same controls, same variable thrusters, same elevation detector. I really don't know what to call that thing, but it basically detects whether you're moving up or down, and it's really useful. But as you can see, it's got a bit more of a stable hover than version 2 did. It's not dropping as much as version 2, and it is a lot more stable. You can see how many adjustments it's making, like just the slightest pixel off and it makes an adjustment, and that's what I love about this thing. You can just leave it in the air and it will stay there, no problem. Okay, so this is the 4th and final, as of right now, version of the flight computer, and it is, as you can see, slightly larger. But the main difference with this is that with all the versions before, it only had 4 thruster clusters, and by that I mean there were only 4 thrusters that you could hook the flight computer into. Now obviously you can like chain the thrusters together, but at the end of the day there's only really 4 variable thrusters that you can hook it into. And I wanted 5 because sometimes you want one in the middle that isn't really affected by the gyro. So that's what this bearing is here. So basically all these bearings that lead to nowhere represent thruster clusters. So you hook a thruster onto that bearing facing 90 degrees this way, and then it will basically do the rest by angling it down. This right here is meant for any thrusters in the middle, anything that you don't want to be affected by the gyro. Now speaking of the gyro, this one has more than 2 sensors on each side. It's got 4, and these ones are angled in slightly. So basically these middle ones detect minute movements and they trigger stuff in the suspension glitches, and these big ones detect larger movements, and those larger movements are usually caused by change in mass. So this is really useful in like cargo ships where the mass tends to change a lot, and so these sensors pick that up and they feed that into the variable thrusters. If just this sensor gets deactivated, it will say, oh, activate a suspension glitch to correct. But if one of these activate, then it will say increase thrust or on one of the sides in order to counteract that, and that's how it can adapt to changes in mass. So basically you have to do very little weight balancing to get this thing down. Now, obviously weight balancing is a very convenient thing to have, like I wouldn't completely avoid it if you're using a flight computer, but it's not strictly necessary. The computer can deal with it. However, it is quite slow to deal with it, and that's just the nature of how the altitude hold works. I wish I could make it faster, but there isn't much of a way that I can think of to make it faster. Oh, that's the wrong creation. But I did make another test computer using version 4, if I can find it somewhere. There it is. I couldn't find it because all the previous tests were unpainted. This one is, so it's sort of blended in with all the painted computers. But anyway, as you can see, there's another set of thrusters in the middle, and that is basically a set of thrusters that's completely not affected by the gyro. And you can use that for helicopter blades or anything else that you just don't want to be affected by the gyro. And yeah, very stable hover, basically the same as version 3. Now I'm going to demonstrate the main feature that this thing has that version 3 didn't, and that is its ability to adapt to changes in mass. Okay, so that seems like a healthy dose of concrete. You can see it's already adjusting those front thrusters to be slightly more angled than the rear ones, and so if I start to lift myself up, you will see that we are still sort of stable. Now obviously it's not the greatest, so you do still have to pay some attention to the weight distribution on your craft, but it will account for small offsets like this. So that's the main thing that this can do that version 3 couldn't. Well, technically version 3 could. It would just increase thrust overall and use the gyro suspension glitches to correct it from there, which really wasn't that elegant. But yeah, that was all the flight computers. I might be thinking, what's the point of a flight computer if we're not going to build anything with it? So I built a few things with it. Now what did I build? I built the things that have been hovering in the sky this whole entire time. Yes, that's how stable they are. I can just leave them there and trust that they're not gonna just fall out the sky or tilt off somewhere and just fly off on their own. So they've been there this whole time. I'm gonna delete those two and start with the newest one, just to save on some frames. So this right here is my latest stable flyer in vanilla. I don't think you guys can hear this, but the thruster sounds are really glitching out right now. I think it's because I had all those flyers just in the sky chilling there. But this is it, my most recent flyer that uses the flight computer. It uses version 4. The other two that you saw still use version 3. But like I said, there isn't really much of a difference, and version 3 is plenty good enough. But this helicopter, like literally 80% of the interior space was taken up by this flight computer. But as you can see, it is it's pretty big. So I wouldn't really recommend using version 4 unless you really need those extra sensors, because if you don't, version 3 is pretty much good enough. This thing is very stable and it doesn't use any of the other 4 thruster clusters. It only uses the middle one, so basically the one that doesn't get affected by the gyro. So this thing's gyro is only controlling suspension glitches. It doesn't control anything else because there are no other thruster clusters for it to adjust. But that's not a big issue because it's pretty stable on its own. But anyways, 1 and 2 are up and down. Now because the variable thrusters are quite slow to react, up and down are quite slow controls. There's a decent bit of input delay, but you know, that's just something that you have to like deal with. I mean, you gotta make some trade-offs with a really stable flyer like this. Either way, numbers 3 and 4 are strafe left and right, nice and intuitive. Number 5 is the rotor blades, that turns it on. Number 6 is the left door. Number 7 is the right door. So really not much to go over as far as controls or aesthetics or function, to be honest. I mean, it's a really simple flyer. It's just a helicopter. And this is also my first ever vanilla helicopter. I'm probably gonna go ahead and make another one that doesn't use these obnoxiously tall rotor blades, just because of how obnoxiously large these thrusters are. But you know, it's a vanilla helicopter, and I really like the way it turned out. So yeah, that's that. Okay, so next up is this thing. Now this is the flyer that I first built with my flight computer. I built it with version 3, and I was like, you know what, I want to build something with this flight computer. I've only been building tests so far. I want to build some, so I just went ahead and built this. Now it was meant to be a VTOL. It turned out looking more like a plane than I had initially wanted it to, but you know, it's fine. It looks alright. You open the doors like that. This is actually the first time I've used a spud gun activated memory bit. Usually I do logic memory bits, but this time I chose to do a spud gun memory bit. But you don't have to get the weird angle to activate that switch again. There's another one over here, and that's the beauty of spud gun memory bits, isn't it? Anyway, so this has a fully furnished interior. It's meant to be like a sort of private VTOL, just like you'd have a private jet. It's like a private VTOL. That's what I saved it on my list as. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you've got a folding out counter for your freshly chopped carrots to just fold through the slits. We don't talk about that. But yeah, there's that. And then we have our hob and an oven made of wood, because why not? And your leather sofa. And then we've got a bathroom in there. And actually, I was really surprised at how well you can exit the toilet seat without getting stuck in the ceiling. And the sofa, to be honest. I'm surprised at how you can exit all of these seats without getting stuck in them. Over here we have the gaming setup / work setup. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is for the interior. Now you might have noticed that this is a very small interior compared to the overall size of the plane. Like the interior why did I pronounce interior like that? Anyway, the interior stops like around about the halfway mark. The rest of it is all the flight computer. As you can see, all that massive jumble of logic, that's the flight computer, and the interior is just ends behind the wing. And the rest of it, like I said, is just the flight computer, and also a bunch of thrusters. Speaking of thrusters, this thing is like really heavy. I thought it was gonna be able to fly with like 8 thrusters, but no, I needed way more than that. Either way, let's close the doors and let's get flying. So again, same controls. Number 3 turns the hover thrusters on. Number 1 is to raise the entire thing up so it angles the thrusters down, and eventually it will angle them far enough down that we start to gain some altitude hold. Why can I not talk? That we start to gain altitude, not altitude hold. That's later. But let's just hold it till we get to like a decent height. Okay, and here we are. The thrusters are sort of pulsing up and down. When they do that, you know that the thing is sort of calmed down. It's found its equilibrium, and it's like buoyant now in space. So it's stable enough for you to easily walk around and do your thing while it's flying. And I used this like complex suspension and piston setup so that I could have my seat really far up in the nose and also get out of it without it looking like there's a big gaping hole in the roof. And as well as that, you could jump onto the roof if you want to. You couldn't do this with the helicopter because obviously there were spinning blades up there, you'd get knocked off. But it's stable enough for you to just ride on the wing. I feel perfectly safe here, and that's honestly the thing I love about all of these vanilla flyers, is that I can go in the most precarious spots ever and still feel perfectly safe, because I know that the computer's not going to mess up. It's not going to randomly pitch forwards and chuck me off the end. It's perfectly stable, and that's honestly one of the best feelings I feel like in this game that I've never really had before, because I've never had a creation that could just sort of fly itself and keep itself in the air. But other than that, there's really not much else to say about this thing. Oh yeah, there is landing gear, which I'll just show while we're falling to our death. But it's slightly glitching out. It's fine. Yeah, you can see the thrusters angling all the way down because they're trying to counteract me falling, but they don't realize that the thrusters themselves aren't on, so it's not really doing much. But either way, that was that creation. Now the last one, I'm gonna fly over to here because we need a lot of space to spawn it in. This is a complete flying mobile base. As you can see, it is absolutely massive. Now before I do anything, I'm gonna get this thing off the ground because it really drops adjust my frames when it's not on the ground, when it's on the ground rather. So I'm just gonna quickly fly it. Again, same controls. Number 3 to start the whole system up. Number 2 will bring us up. It's gonna angle these thrusters down, so let's gain a decent bit of altitude. You can see I just gained like 20 FPS just from lifting the thing off the ground. This is also why I was able to have 3 flyers in the air, 3 complex flyers in the air and not be lacking that much. It's because they were all just their own separate entities, not interacting with anything. And that's honestly a great thing that this game does, the fact that it is less laggy when they're not interacting with things. But either way, that's simple controls. Now let's go on to the interior. So this is the main deck. There are lifts over here, which I designed these lifts to be used when you spawn the thing on your personal lift, because obviously you can't enter from the bottom because it's on the floor. But these lifts work really well. I don't tend to use them when I initially spawn them in, just because it gets too laggy. I just can't be asked to deal with that, so I just use the block editor to fly on up. But you know, it's up to you, I guess. Anyway, this is the main deck space. Let's go over into this secondary area here. Alright, there's a bit of a hole. That's because there's meant to be a lift there, but obviously when it spawns on the lift, it's at its default down position. But this does use one mod. It's called the Survival Parts and Creative mod. For some reason I couldn't find it on the workshop anymore. I don't know if they discontinued it or whatever, but I still have it in this world, and it basically lets you get beds and small chests and lockers in creative mode, even though there's like survival exclusive part. But as you can see, this is the living quarters for like with beds and stuff. Here we have the bathroom, very spacious. Well, not really, but you know. Anyway, and then up here we have like the dining area, and these seats are slightly inconvenient, like chucks you on top of the table. It's fine, but yeah, there's that. You can also walk around and chill on the front if you want to. There's not really much else to do here, so now let's move back. So here is the dressing area. You can like stand here and you can get a good angle of yourself, but other than that, there's just some random plants. I'm not entirely happy with the way there's just plants like randomly put there, but I don't know, it's fine. Anyway, cables leading nowhere and thrusters, because obviously it takes a lot of thrusters to fly something this big. And then these stairs lead up to the helm. Another thing I like about this is that when you turn, the helm actually turns as well. I don't know if the turny thing is called a helm, or just the entire thing is called, I don't know the terminology, but I like the way it turns. It's really satisfying to look at. But yeah, now let's walk on downstairs. Now this is sort of the industrial area where all the real survival stuff happens. Just because it has a crafting loop does not mean this is a viable thing to build in survival, as you can clearly see. Even with the 30 times 4 thrusters that are on the exterior, it's still not enough to get this thing in the air, so I needed to absolutely douse this thing with thrusters everywhere. But you know, it's fine. Anyway, this is the gaming setup. I don't know why I like making gaming setups in my creations. I just like the way they, I don't know, don't ask. But triple monitors, a lot of I could have used this space for so much more functional stuff, yet I used an entire wall just for a useless cosmetic gaming setup, and I love it. Also, I love how when you get out the seat, it just chucks you onto the desk, which is kind of funny. But anyways, let's move back. So we have cookpots here, refrigerators, obviously the crafting loop, which this is absurdly heavy. I'm not gonna lie, it's insanely heavy. We've got resource collectors put in the most inconvenient spots possible, because you gotta first get up onto the deck and then into the room and then down the stairs just to get one resource collector, and then you gotta do that again but only walking because you can't run while holding one. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, this is where the vast majority of the thrusters are. Actually, that's probably a lie, but this is where a lot more thrusters are, and it's also where the flight computer is located. And you can tell by the two sensors that this is the flight computer version 3, and it works great. It's reliable. We've got just a bunch of thrusters here, to be honest, and this is also a nice room for like maintenance, which the other 2 ships didn't really have. With this one, if you ever get into a collision or something, you can come down here, get into this compartment, and you can check on the gyro, make sure it's completely on axis, because the thing with vanilla gyros is that sometimes they can get off axis if you like hit the ground too hard or something. In my experience, this has been an extremely resilient gyro, like my most resilient gyro that I've ever built. It's insane. I'm so surprised at how much impact this thing can resist. As you can see, I've just smacked it like 7 times. Any other gyro would usually get off axis by now, but no, not this one. I don't know what I did differently, but it just works so well. But anyway, that's that. That's the engine room, and that's basically the entire interior of this thing. This is the lift that I was talking about earlier, the reason why there was a hole in the floor there. Yeah, that's the entire interior gone over. This is a massive mobile base. But yeah, number 4, now this is actually pretty genius. I'll demonstrate what number 4 does later. Number 5, I have slightly forgotten. Oh yeah, no, I remember now. Number 7, let's actually go downstairs to demonstrate this a little bit better. So this right here is the way you get in and out. Once you get this thing off the ground, I wouldn't recommend landing it again because of the lag, obviously. But to get in and out, you press this button, it activates the pistons, and then you press the red switch to lower on down. You have a sensor here that activates at 7 blocks away from the ground, so you know when to stop pressing the red button. But realistically speaking, you can keep going until it hits the ground. We've got 30 blocks of range here, and yeah, it's just a little lift. And again, I can stand here knowing perfectly well that the flyer is not going to just kick me off. So yeah, let's get back into the flyer now. Alright, here we are. So now let's head back up to the top and let's talk about what those 3 buttons do. So number 7 activates the lift again, and number 6 will lower it. Now because of our third person angle, we can't really see it until it gets really low, but you can see it there. So yeah, number 5, 6 and 7 are just controls for that lift. Now you might see 3 logic gates over here as well. I forget what this one does. Oh yeah, this one triggers at like 5 blocks or something away from the ground. This one triggers at 20 blocks away from the ground, and this one triggers at 7 blocks away from the ground. And this 7 blocks is 7 blocks away, and this logic gate is taking inputs from where the lift is at. So basically, if you see this logic gate activate, then stop lowering the lift, because that means you're close enough to the ground already. But yeah, these are just 3 indicated logic gates that you can look at a glance, because obviously with the third person angle, it's kind of hard to get a good view of how far off the ground you actually are. That's a real issue with Scrap Mechanic. I really wish they would sort out the camera and make it so that you can actually see the entirety of a creation. I'm really hoping that comes in chapter 2, but you know, when's chapter 2 coming? Anyway, with that said, that's pretty much everything gone over. Now let's actually get to moving this thing. It's got like a bit of speed, really not that much. But as you can see, I had 70 FPS and now I'm down to like 50, which is still bearable, okay? But when I start turning, I don't know what it is about turning, but this thing just hates turning. It's gone down to 19, 18 FPS. Now, when I stop turning and when I let the thing calm itself down, you can see that I'm at 20 FPS, but I'm not really getting back to 70 FPS, which I was at earlier. So when I press number 4, it shoots a bit of cardboard, and now, as you can see, we're back up to 60 FPS. It's still not quite the 70, but you know, considering how big it is, 60 is well good enough. But the reason that works is because of what's going on over here. So if I cut a hole there, you can see there's a chest full to the brim of cardboard, and basically this cardboard feeds into a vacuum pump. And there's also a spud gun there which shoots cardboard. So when you press number 4, it shoots the 2 spud guns, which shoots the cardboard, and there's a logic repeater there which feeds into the vacuum pump. So basically, as soon as the spud gun shoots the piece of cardboard, the vacuum pump will replace it again. Meaning, you can shoot the spud gun this many times before running out of cardboard ammo. And basically, what that does is it gives the entire creation a block update, which basically frees up all the frames. I don't know why that works, I don't know how that works, but somehow giving the entire creation a block update for some reason makes it way smoother as far as FPS is concerned. And yeah, that's pretty much what that system is all about. We also have a little balcony here if you want to just chill and check out the view. But yeah, with that said, that is all the flyers that I have built with my new flight computer setup. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please subscribe. If you haven't, please subscribe, and I'll see you hopefully in the next one. See ya.